Welcome to the PowerCat Podcast, the original K-State sports show. Here's your host, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to this special edition of the PowerCat Podcast. Fitz and Cole to discuss some recruiting news that happened late yesterday, fairly late, with Ian Premer from Great Bend picking Notre Dame, which caught us a little bit off guard, to be real honest. But he did. Now we're going to talk about how this came to pass, what's next, and maybe some other details with the recruiting. Cole Carmody joins me, our recruiting editor, our analyst, our King Poobah. Cole, there seems to be two versions of events here that played out with Ian Premer's selection. One being he kept it totally secret the entire time, and even Notre Dame was surprised it was them. The other being apparently schools were told that they were out, including Notre Dame, which signaled an acceleration of NIL. I think the truth's probably somewhere in between those, but give me your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, it's strange because we don't typically have these kinds of recruitments, right? Like, you know, I've kind of had a long time to think about this, and it was literally been a whirlwind 24 hours from waking up at 7 a.m. and thinking, oh crap, like this actually might happen, because by all accounts, it was going to happen. Ian was going to choose Kansas State. Now, we didn't know if it was going to be yesterday. We didn't know if it was going to be today. We didn't know if it was going to be tomorrow. But we felt really good that Kansas State was going to be the choice. And I say we, meaning everybody, right? Like everybody, from national people at On3 to national people at 24/7 to Kansas State people inside Veneer felt really good that Kansas State was going to be the choice. And of course, there were still some people who said, well, keep an eye for Iowa State, keep an eye for Notre Dame. Like, it wasn't completely over. And so that's when things started to get a little muddy and a little cloudy, because, you know, Kansas State was very confident, which led everybody to be very confident. Now, I don't truly believe that Kansas State ever maybe thought that that he was going to commit to them right away. I don't think Kansas State thought that. I do believe that they think they won this recruitment, until obviously at around 3:00, there was a prediction logged from On3, and then an hour later he commits to Notre Dame, which is a whole nother story, a whole nother topic for another day. But it's a strange turn of events, because it felt like K-State was in the driver's seat all the way until they weren't. And I think you can agree with me, Fitz. Like, I fully stand by everything that we reported. I fully stand by everything that I said, that I believed, because at the time it was true until it wasn't. And I think a lot of this has to do with just the fact that Ian wasn't talking to anybody. Yeah. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, oh, I had an inside track, I was talking to Ian. Nobody was talking to Ian. He wasn't talking to the coaches. And so nobody really knew what was going on. And in today's era of recruitment, that is not something you typically see.
Now, there was a tweet from a colleague that I greatly respect, Kevin Flaherty, about this is what happens when you only talk to your own recruiting staff. And I'm going to push back on that. The 24/7 national analyst covering this for 24/7 Sports is Tom Loy, who's incredible. He's made his career covering Notre Dame. His best sources are at Notre Dame. He thought he was going to Kansas State. Now, why would he think that? He was probably told that he called and said, I'm not coming to Notre Dame. We'll find out everything here. But let's stop looking back. The kid's made his choice. Good for him. Maybe he got a bag of money. Maybe he didn't. That's the industry right now.
Right.
But Cole, I'll say this. If it was about NIL, and it's anything that Kansas State might want to match, which we know they don't go into this space very often with freshmen, but he might be worth it. They have until July 1. Before July 1, the rules changed. Notre Dame snuck this in with the old rules. They could just give it him. I'm not saying they did, but under the rules, to let me clarify, they could give it him $5 million. They could give him $100,000 cash, but not come July 1st. That's when everything changes and the Deloitte clearinghouse of NIL deals pushes through. The point being, if K-State does want to respond, they better get their asses in gear and do so, because by next week, it's going to be a totally different world.
Right. And that's one of those things where, again, we don't know if that's a major factor by everything we've heard. NIL was not necessarily a driving force in this recruitment. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to see, okay, you had Iowa State, K-State, KU, and Notre Dame. Which school has the deepest pockets, right? Like from everything we've heard, K-State's and KU's NIL offers were very, very, very good. Now, what does that mean? Who knows? But it wasn't, a low ball offer or anything like that. Was NIL a driving factor for him picking Notre Dame? I would hope the answer would be no. I can't confirm. I can't deny. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the reason he chose Notre Dame was NIL. I know that that's kind of been floated out there. I don't necessarily agree with that because I can't tell you, yes, Notre Dame had a substantially higher NIL offering than Kansas State. We don't know that for sure. But what we do know is there was a missing piece somewhere along the line where supposedly everyone thought Notre Dame was out until they weren't at the very last minute. And when we say last minute, literally 60 minutes ago was when this changed. And I honestly, Fitz, don't know if Ian had his mind made up until until yesterday afternoon. I mean, we don't know. Because he wasn't telling anyone, including the coaches. And, kind of as an aside here, I think that there's one thing to learn from this. It's that there are certain ways to go about handling your recruitment, covering a recruitment, and even as a coach in handling kind of something like this. And, I'm very lucky because I've been able to see this from a multiple perspective. As a high school coach, I've seen what the recruitment side looks like for the kid from the high school coach perspective and trying to help the kid out and talking to college coaches. And they really do pay attention to what the high school coaches say. I've also seen it on a much, much lower scale from a player's perspective. When I was recruited out of high school, now granted, it was a bunch of NAIA schools, so it looks vastly different. But to get the, hey, we want you, and then 2 months later say, actually, we don't have a spot for you. I've seen that. I've noticed that. And now, obviously, getting to cover it from this perspective, you can see it from all the other angles. And so this is just a recruitment unlike any that I've honestly seen because it felt very, very early 2000s, like in a sense that nobody really knew. And we finally got the outcome right after people were told.
Let's be clear here. We're not attacking Ian Premer. It was his recruitment. He can handle it however the hell he wants. The process was uncomfortable. It was weird. I'm all for him keeping everything close to the vest, but it appears some things weren't close to the vest because I'm pretty sure the Iowa State and Kansas coaches thought they were out. Why would they think that if he hadn't shared anything with anyone? So that just doesn't make sense to me at all. But he made his choice, and I really hope it works out. Being a star tight end at Notre Dame, I don't even know if he's Catholic. If you're Catholic, I mean, I get it. I totally get it. But if it doesn't work out, is this a Dylan Edwards situation?
I can see it. I mean, this is certainly, you look at what happened with Dylan, and obviously Dad played at K-State, and that appeal to play for Kansas State's always been there for Ian as well. And there's been lots of people who said that K-State was always going to be at the top of his list. And then there are some people who said K-State was always going to be a backup plan. And I couldn't tell you because you can't jump into the mind of a 17-year-old. But I will say that I do think K-State's always going to be there. And, people can look at that and look at it as, from multiple different angles. But I think for K-State, you have to, because you develop relationships with these kids. You develop relationships with these in-state kids when they're sophomores in high school. I mean, K-State knew about Ian when he was a sophomore. And so they've developed that long bond, that long relationship. If he has a great senior year, signs with Notre Dame, goes there, plays there, and then realizes this isn't what I want, well, then he's always going to have a place at Kansas State. I feel very comfortable saying that because, that appeal for Ian to play close to home was something that I think a lot of people discounted in this recruitment. Like it was there. I'm not saying that South Bend's a long ways away, but it's definitely not Manhattan, Kansas, and it's definitely not Great Bend, Kansas. And so we'll see what happens with that. I still wouldn't close the book on this recruitment. I'm sure Notre Dame's going to try and lock him down as quickly as possible, but it's never over until it's over. We learned that the hard way, and quite honestly, maybe not the hard way with Lincoln Cure, but I wouldn't say this thing is fully over until obviously his name is signed on the dotted line.
What's next for Kansas State? Do they carry that couch down the stairs and pivot at some point to another tight end, or do they do that kind of slyly while continuing to pursue Ian Premer till signing day? I don't think they're giving up. I know they're not giving up.
No. Well, that's the luxury of having a Lawson McGraw. They got Lawson McGraw in the fold very quickly, the legacy. And so I think the plan with him at first maybe was to kind of be like an edge rusher, but also he can play tight end. And I think that he's a Division I prospect at tight end, and he's a Division I prospect at edge. I don't know necessarily how his body is going to grow and develop. Lawson McGraw, and I think K-State would tell you this, is not the impact player right now that Ian Premer would be at tight end. Lawson McGraw is not going to be a guy who comes in right away and plays. But that's okay, because you don't need that with the way the tight end room is structured right now. And there was lots of conversations about, was Ian somebody that K-State needed? And I think that that's twofold. I think positionally, the answer to that question is no, because I'm not sure they were going to take two tight ends in this class. And so if you're planning on Lawson McGraw playing tight end, well, there's your one tight end. Don't think they were going to take two. Now, was he needed from a perception standpoint? I think the answer to that question is yes. I mean, you can't sit here and say that K-State has done a good job recruiting inside of the state of Kansas. Now, I will say they've gotten two guys who were very, very high on their board in LaMarcus Barber and Lawson McGraw. I commend them for that. But I will also say there are some guys who they wanted. Ian Premer, J.J. Dunnigan. They didn't hit on those guys. And so those are the ones that really sting. I'm not going to sit here and say the other guys inside the state of Kansas who ended up going to KU are guys who they needed to get, because they don't know how high they were on them anyway. But the guys that they wanted to get inside of the state of Kansas right now, it feels like they're 0 for 2 on, or two guys they didn't land at the top of the rankings, and Dunnigan and Premer. So that really stings if you're K-State. But I think that once again, it's not over. And so you answer where they go from here. Well, there are 4 guys who are going to commit July 1st through July 4th. And we'll kind of look at that more in depthly behind our paywall over at GoPowercat. But I think that there are still some very quality targets out there. But I mean, it'd be impossible to sit here and say that the class can be just as good without Ian as it would have been with him. Like, that's just not something that happens. And so one of those things, you just have to move on. Will they get a headliner? I don't know. But I do know that they're not going to stop trying, because this staff will turn over every single stone they can to make sure that this football program continues to go on its upward trajectory.
Well, the young man's an incredibly talented athlete, a very good tight end. I thought a great fit for Kansas State in the way they use tight ends. But he made the choice that he feels is best for him. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see if Kansas State pursues another tight end or stands pat. I don't think it's a position of great need. It's a position where there was a player too good to pass up.
Right.
So we'll see if they do change and pursue another tight end. Cole, I think you're with me. I suspect they won't.
Yeah.
They'll just move on to other talented athletes, but we'll see. We'll be on top of it at GoPowercat. You and the young guys that are helping with your recruiting are kicking butt. And most of that stuff is behind the paywall. And folks, we're 50% off for a short time right now, leading up to the end of June. So make sure you subscribe to GoPowercat, get behind that paywall. With Cole and the boys, they're kicking butt. They're pretty cautious in their coverage and not too rah-rah. But boy, even us, we got fooled on this one. We thought this one was over, and nope, it was not. And that is the story of recruiting, my friend. It is literally not over until the ink is dried on that NIL deal. And now, or not NIL deal, the scholarship agreement. And now players even break that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a nutty world. I'm tired. I want a nap. Anything else, Cole?
All I have to say is that this is fun. And someone put on our message boards that recruiting is like grown men's soap opera. I never heard it described as like that. but I'm totally on board with it. I think it was a negative, but I think it's a positive. Give me all of this drama. It's fun, Fitz. It's fun.
It was a hell of a cliffhanger, brought to you by the best player in the state of Kansas this year. Not the ending K-State wanted, but is it over? Well, we'll see. Thanks for watching, everyone.
This has been a GoPowercat.com and Spirit Street production. Please support this show by subscribing to this YouTube channel or follow us on your favorite podcast platform.